Hi, Gerhard Bloom, once again looking at the tyranny and the delusions of the social justice movement. So this is very much on the delusional side of that particular equation. Once again, at the Super Bowl, they're going to be playing something that is recognized to be, by deluded leftists, the Black national anthem. There is no Black national anthem. There is no Black nation. There is the Nation of Islam, militantly anti-Semitic and, divisive and, yes, hate white people, hate Jews, the Nation of Islam. But it is not the Black nation, doesn't speak for Black people. There is one national anthem, the national anthem of the United States. And it is a disgrace to Black servicemen and women who have sacrificed everything, given up their lives, who have fought and died under the flag of the United States that represents them and their country. I remember listening to a podcast by Glenn Lowry, The Glenn Show. It is brilliant. He and John McWhorter have an excellent podcast discussing these various issues, racial division and all of that. They're both giant intellectual and moral giants. They're both Black. I recall Glenn Lowry talking about how Western European history is his history. Of course it's his history. Blacks have been living in the United States for centuries. Of course, American culture is their culture. And Blacks have contributed in extremely meaningful ways. Jazz. American jazz is, I believe, it is the unique contribution of America to the world. And that was largely from the Black community. This is more tribalizing and racially dividing the United States. Recall the Martin Luther King, right? He dreamed of the day where his children would be judged on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And now you have racially segregated dorms, racially segregated graduation ceremonies, racial preferences in hiring. It is awful, awful. In the school system, they are dividing kids along racial lines, teaching white kids they're, oppressors. They've got this imaginary power called white privilege. And little Black kids, they're oppressed. Nobody likes them. They won't be able to succeed. Learned helplessness is a real phenomenon. And I did a previous video on the racial violence towards whites and Asians by members of the Black community who have been fed this poisonous systemic oppression narrative. It is a lie. It is a lie. An interesting survey from Pew, circa 2020. They asked members of the white community, Asian, Hispanic, and Blacks, how important is racial identity to you? For 15% of white Americans, race was somewhat or very important to their identity. You know who those white people are who think race is important to their identity? They are racist. These are your neo-Nazis and your skinheads. Yes. For Asians, Hispanics, and Blacks, in each of those communities, race was somewhat or very important to their identity, over 50%. Over 50% of those populations. In the Black community, 74% consider race important or very important to their identities. This is awful. Carol Swain, a Black scholar, brilliant Black scholar, she was one of the authors that Claudine Gay pirated from. Yes. So Carol Swain, she writes the book, The New White Nationalism. You know who likes this language of critical race theory and dividing people along racial lines? The neo-Nazis. In the United States and in Canada, as it happens, you have Italian Americans, Canadians, Polish Americans, Dutch, German Americans. Vanishingly few, except those 50%, those neo-Nazis and skinheads and those types. This reminds me of General Yamamoto on the eve of the Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor. Beware, we could be waking a sleeping giant. You start race shaming people and dividing them along racial lines. You want me to identify with my whiteness and feel bad for it? This is not how threats to identity, people respond to threats to their identity. They become defensive and they become angry. This could be very ugly. The outcome could be extremely ugly. There's a famous science experiment, social psychology experiment, the Robbers Cave. You divide kids arbitrarily up into I think it was the rattlers and the eagles, and competing against one another, living in separate camps. They had to call a stop to it. It was like a modern day Lord of the Flies. Freud speaks about this, the narcissism of small differences. Almost any arbitrary feature can become a divisive issue, and people will coalesce around identities. You give one group of kids, schoolboys on a soccer team, the red penny and the blue pennies, and these guys will go at each other, and there'll be fights breaking out on the soccer field, right? Because this is my team, this is who I am. And the last thing the United States needs is racially dividing the country. No, there is no black national anthem. No. And if you think this is whiteness, no. There are plenty of people in the black community who are outraged by this as I am. And many perhaps even more so, although that's hard to believe because I find this thing completely outrageous. It is toxic. And national anthem played at the NFL, great. You play that black national anthem, that would be it. I would be changing channels. Anyways, thank you so much for your time and attention. And please do check out my book, Deconstructing Social Justice. It's available on Amazon. Not important because I wrote it. I wrote it because the issues could not be more important. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Bye-bye now.